Growing up as a kid, you would expect every day to be filled with joy and laughter, without a care in the world. Well, I wish this were that kind of story, but sadly, there comes a time when reality sets in. As a kid, we have all had our experiences with our fears of the dark and what dwells in the shadows. Sometimes we let our minds wander and create monsters. May 16th, 2005, when I was 8 years old, I shared a room with my little brother. We were your average siblings, always getting into fights, trying to outdo each other, but we always got along. We shared everything when we were younger, such as toys, clothes, even our old bunk bed. Ah, the bunk bed. I can still remember building forts every night as we watched movies on our Windows 10 PC. Every night our parents had us switch beds just so we wouldn't fight about who got which bunk. I usually preferred the top because I liked how small everything looked down below. One night it was my turn on the bottom bed. I just finished brushing my teeth before my brother, and after I was done, I walked to my parents' room and noticed the light was on. I opened the door and saw my brother was asleep on their bed. I guess my parents were out shopping for groceries, I thought, so I draped a blanket over him and decided to leave him on their bed, then turned off the light and headed to our room. Before I made it to our room, I heard a knock at the front door. I quietly walked down the hallway, hoping not to wake my brother. I knew I wasn't supposed to answer the door, especially this late at night. Therefore, before I came to the door, I took a quick peek around the corner to see who it was. There was no one there, which was weird because I just heard someone knock. I brushed it off, thinking it was the neighborhood kids ding-dong ditching our house. So I tiptoed closer to the door, trying not to be seen in the porch light shining through the door's window panes. I glanced through the door's windows, hoping to see who was out there, and no one was at the door. I sprung back in utter surprise, almost running into the living room couch. It was so loud that I felt the house shake beneath my feet. I was so scared I slammed into the wall, trying to run around a corner to get to my room. After that, I spent most of the night hiding under the covers. A few hours had passed, so I decided to listen to music on my MP3 player to take my mind off what had happened. Before I could play a song, the bedroom door opened. I looked over and saw my brother. As he stood in the doorway, he looked up at me. "It's my turn on the top bunk," he said in a groggy voice. I was so frightened from earlier that I forgot, so I jumped out of the bed to move to the bottom bunk. "Do you need help getting up?" I asked as I walked over to close the bedroom door. I turned around and my brother was gone. I brushed it off, thinking he was already in bed. Then I heard him ask me to tuck him in, so I climbed up, but he wasn't there. Nor was he on the bottom bunk. I was so confused. I ran to my parents' room to find him still asleep in their bed. At this point, I was so tired, I went back to bed and passed out for the night. The next morning, I told my parents about what had happened, and they said it was just a nightmare. But it couldn't have been a nightmare. It felt so real. Even my arm had a bruise from slamming into the wall. The next night, I made sure my brother went to bed first so that I knew where he was. I climbed into bed and started listening to my music. An hour had passed and my headphones were no longer in my ears. And then I heard my brother asking me to wake up. I rolled over and looked down. He was still asleep. Even though I wasn't fully awake, I could have sworn I heard him talking to me. I rolled back over and then I saw it. A black, smoke-like figure, almost transparent, but still visible to see in the dark, with bright blue eyes. We stared at each other for what felt like hours. My body was completely frozen in fear, and I didn't know what to do. Never in my life have I felt time move so slowly as I stared into those blue eyes. I was so scared that I could hear my heart beating through my chest. All of a sudden, my body unfroze, and my only reaction was to throw a punch. My hand went right through where its mouth would be. I felt cold for a few seconds, then my hand began to fall asleep so much that it began hurting. I began to feel the pain moving up my arm, not being able to move my arm, and I screamed for my dad to come help. Seconds later, my dad came bursting through the door. I told him what had happened, and again he said it was just a nightmare and that the pain is from lying on my bruised arm. He then said goodnight and walked out the room. I rolled back over trying to forget what happened. My eyes shut wide open as I peered over my shoulder, and it grew louder from my chest. Years have passed, and I'm now 21 years old and have grown used to scary things. I enjoy watching horror movies every night before bed and going to haunted houses when they're in town. I moved out of my old room into the spare room back in high school because my brother got tired of me watching horror movies every night. Since then, we now go to different colleges, but I'm still living with my parents because I can't afford a dorm at my college, which is fine because I'm not much of a social person and I really don't want to deal with college dating drama. One night, I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers playing scary games. After a couple of videos, I shut off my TV and turned my head towards the wall, avoiding everything in the room behind me. Ever since that night when I was younger, I always found it easier to sleep with my back to the room. After a while, I began hearing tapping on the other side of the wall coming from my brother's room. But this couldn't have been him. My brother was at college, so I brushed it off thinking it was a pipe rattling in the walls. It got a little bit annoying, so I rolled over to reduce the noise. After I rolled over, I caught a glimpse of my room. Nothing out of the ordinary, just dirty clothes on the ground and a few empty Gatorade bottles on the floor next to my bed. Just your basic average college room, minus not having anyone to share it with. I closed my eyes and began hearing the tapping again, only it wasn't coming from the wall behind me, but my closet instead. I opened my eyes, beginning to panic, wondering what the hell was going on. I quickly panned the room, hoping it was just my imagination. Then I saw it. In the darkness. Just standing in the corner by my closet door, staring at me with those bright blue eyes.